2 minutes before being shot, Holly takes a great big lick of her Rocky Road ice cream. She giggles self-consciously as it drips over her hand, because her father James is watching her grinning while shaking his head. "Slow down, Holly," says Jessica, Holly's mother. Holly tells her it's not her fault it's melting, it's just too hot today. The Robinson family is having the time of their lives on vacation in Florida. This is a dream come true for the working-class family from Cleckheaton, West Yorkshire in northern England. Despite constant negative news in the US about Florida, for this family it's a place of sheer beauty and wonder. They've already visited Walt Disney World in Orlando, and of course Holly had about 100 photos taken with her favorite pair of Disney characters, Mickey and Minnie Mouse. It's been the perfect holiday so far for the two parents who worked ungodly hours for years to get to America. It was worth it. The US is everything and more than they expected it to be. They've heard that some parts of Florida could be dangerous for tourists at night, and they're old enough to remember the couple, also from West Yorkshire, who was shot by a gang while on vacation there. The unfortunate married couple was just resting on the side of the road in their rental car when they were blasted with bullets. Totally innocent people who just didn't want to hand over all their holiday savings. The guy died and the woman survived, and after it was reported, it made British folks think twice about vacationing across the pond. But that was back in 1993. It was all over the British press, more so because 9 foreign tourists had been murdered in Florida in the space of just 1 year. Street gangs were everywhere back then, but the Robinsons have been told that the US is much safer now, and as long as they stay away from just a few no-go areas of Florida, they definitely won't meet with any trouble. And if you were to stop them in the street and ask them at this very minute, they would tell you that the US is not as dangerous as everyone makes it out to be. Just about every American they've met so far has been more than friendly. People have been so welcoming, from the staff at the hotel to the folks they've met in the streets. Americans, said Jessica after just a few days, are way more friendly than Brits. James couldn't agree more. So as they walk down Ocean Drive on South Beach in Florida's famed Miami Beach, they're not exactly on their guard. This stretch of road is utterly amazing, with its pretty white buildings looking so cute compared to the grim gray buildings of the family's town in industrial Yorkshire. Holly licks her arm, where the dripped rocky road is now forming a series of veinous rivulets. "Ta-da," she says after she's lapped up the last line. "Look, Dad, your sweet, lovely breath vaporized my ice cream," she says sarcastically. James does have beer breath from drinking earlier at the nearby Irish pub. This will come back to haunt him big time, but not for a while yet. 1 minute before being shot. The Robinsons are right in some respects. Florida isn't really that dangerous, not in the tourist areas anyway, not usually. But on this day, it is. Little do the Robinsons know that there's a gang beef being settled on Ocean Drive on this particular day. That beef is between a Haitian immigrant gang known as Zoe Pound and one of the Crips gangs. Such gang beefs have led to a bunch of murders and drive-by shootings as of late, but the tourist areas are usually spared from such violence. Thing is, there's a lot of money to be made selling cocaine where tourism-focused nightlife is abundant, and right now, these two gangs are in somewhat of a disagreement when it comes to drug-dealing turf. But they've arranged to meet in the day in what should be a safe, crowded place to talk things over. It has to be said, though, that friendly dialogue and diplomacy are not their strong points. At this very moment, a Zoe Pound gang member feels a Crips gang member has insulted him. In reality, he's being what you might call overly sensitive. But that's all it takes for guns to be drawn. Mere words are spoken, and bang, 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 bang. Minute 1. Screams ring out on Ocean Drive as people run for cover. Gang members lay out on the street, puddles of blood forming below their close to dead bodies. You can already hear a siren in the distance. Surely, the cops can't be coming already. Minute 2. James Robinson has his daughter Holly cradled in his arms. Tears are streaming down his face. He's shouting, "Someone call an ambulance!" He isn't even aware that he's also been shot. "No, no, 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 no," he cries. "Holly, Holly, look at Daddy!" Holly's eyes are closed. James doesn't know if she's unconscious or dead. Blood is all over him, leaking from Holly's head. He looks to his side and sees his wife Jessica down on the floor clutching her stomach. At least she's conscious, but she's moaning and groaning. Minute 3. James isn't much of a reader, so before he and his family went to Florida, he knew little about the fact that 2021 was one of the worst years for U.S. homicides with a firearm. There were around 21,000 deaths, covering murders, accidents, and homicides, all related to gun violence. That number now stands at the peak of a line that's been traveling upward for years. You have to go back to 1994 to see numbers so high, but James didn't know, and he also wasn't aware that the USA has the most heavily armed citizenry in the world. Every year, there are usually over 100 people who are shot and killed by accident just because they stood too close to where guns were fired. James's friends were wrong to tell him that the US is much safer now. The US is as violent, or if you believe the statistics, much more violent than just a few years ago. James doesn't know it, but on that same weekend, he and his family are shot. 17 people are killed with a firearm across the whole country. Minute 4. The police and an ambulance are already on their way. It's at this point that James realizes he's also been hit. It's taken a while for the pain to register, but even now he only feels a slight throbbing pain. This is partly because he's in shock, but it's also because you can be shot in various parts of your body where the pain you feel isn't too bad at all. It's just a good thing he wasn't shot in the kneecap, because that really hurts. Jessica, though, she's been shot in the place you really don't want to be shot, the abdomen. She's in agony, so much agony she can't really help her daughter and husband. She can't seem to move either. She doesn't know it, but she's been hit in one of the worst places when it comes to complications. She's been shot by a high-velocity firearm, and that bullet was traveling at 2,000 feet per second when it entered her. The bullet has not hit any main arteries, so she can be thankful for that. Still, this bullet has made its way into her intestines, and right now, acid and intestinal bacteria are leaking inside of her. She has no idea that the injury to her peritoneum, which is a thin tissue that goes around the inner wall of the abdomen and lines the abdominal organs, is not good news at all. In short, all the bad stuff, the bile, feces, and all that nasty stuff everyone has in their stomachs is leaking out because this thin tissue has been damaged. This can be bad, very bad. She's at least breathing, but in some cases a bullet to the abdomen can hit an artery and the person can go into cardiac arrest. If that happened to Jessica, there'd be a 90% chance she wouldn't get home to tell all her buddies about Walt Disney World and the photogenic Mickey Mouse. Still, now she has sprung a leak, and she could die from the sometimes deadly peritonitis. Minute 5. Come on, darling, open your eyes. James keeps saying to Holly, who's still not responsive. Where's the ambulance? He screams, as people are now crowding around the family, some taking photos and videos with their phones and already putting them online. As you'll see, while they're doing this for all the wrong reasons, it can also be helpful. James looks at Jessica, who has just collapsed into a heap. Now her groaning is faint and her face is pale. That's because the reduced blood flow in her body means a decrease in the number of red blood cells. This interrupted blood flow is also why she just slumped over. Minute 6. The ambulance is here already, as are the cops. The paramedics head straight over to the family and call for more paramedics once they see how many people are down. Right now, 2 of the gang members are already dead. Some are injured and about 12 guys have run away. Incidentally, when James was a teenager, he'd been stabbed in a disagreement over who was the better football team, Leeds United or Huddersfield Town. Stabbings in the UK, where guns aren't as available, are often the go-to action when violence gets ugly. It's less dangerous than being shot, with about an 8% fatality rate compared to 1/3 of people dying when they take a bullet or bullets. If you get shot in the heart, your chances of surviving are pretty slim, with a fatality rate of about 25%. Being stabbed there has a fatality rate of 12%. But you can be hit in the leg or arm and not feel much, and then bleed out and die because the bullet hit an artery. 1 minute you're wondering what happened, and the next you're on the floor, close to death. But another place you certainly don't want to get shot in is the head. Our precious little Holly is experiencing that right now. Minute 7. She's still unconscious as she's placed into the ambulance. The paramedics are now looking for other injuries besides the obvious one in her head, where they can see the entry wound. There's no exit wound, so the bullet is still inside her. That's very unfortunate. Gunshot wounds to the head give you a 42% chance of survival, but most of the survivors are hit in the extremities of the head, so the bullet just glances off. Taking one right in the head and pulling through is very tough, and even if you do survive, you might never be able to use a spoon again. If you're shot in the head and the bullet penetrates the brain, you have only a 5% chance of surviving. Fortunately for Holly, she's not been hit in the side of the head, which helps, as you'll soon see. But right now, the paramedics aren't spending too much time speculating about the trajectory of the bullet, just as they've learned in their training. All their efforts focus on keeping Holly alive and looking for other injuries. They've also been very careful to survey the scene. After all, more bullets could fly. They don't know if the shooters are still around. Holly is still breathing, but her neurological status is unresponsive. The paramedics palpate her head and face, meaning to examine it with their fingers, looking for deformities or any leakages. They also check to see if her pupils react to light, because non-reactive pupils can be a sign of significant head trauma. In Holly's case, there's certainly a bit of that. Now they've set off, taking the fastest route to the nearest emergency room. Due to the seriousness of her injuries, they're going a bit faster than the usual 70 to 80 miles per hour. Minute 8. Jessica is now in the ambulance and paramedics are palpating her distended stomach. Because it's distended, they consider intra-abdominal bleeding. One of them writes down hemorrhage and possible spillage of gastrointestinal contents. She's conscious and obviously in a lot of pain, which further indicates a leak. Her breathing is also shallow, so the paramedics open up her airways and give her oxygen. As for the external hemorrhage, they focus on preventing more loss of blood. She's cleaned and her wound is covered to prevent infection, although there's not much they can do about the spillage inside her and how that might cause a deadly infection. When she's given fluids intravenously as well as antibiotics, she's not given painkillers just yet, because it can obscure diagnosis with such possibly complicated injuries. Bullet wound injuries are most of the time complicated, given that you don't know what damage a bullet traveling at high speed can do. Anyway, Jessica is almost passed out right now. Minute 15. It seems that James is the most fortunate member of the family, although right now he wishes it was him that was the worst off, not his daughter and wife. He's actually chatting to the paramedics trying to explain to them what happened. He still doesn't really feel much pain. That's because while we said bullet wounds are usually complicated, James has been shot in his leg and there's a clear exit and entry wound. The bone in his thigh, the nerves, and the major vessels are all undamaged. The paramedics have wrapped up his wound, but when he goes to the hospital after having a thorough check, he'll be given some antibiotics and what's called surgical debridement. That's just cleaning of the wound, removal of dead tissue, and a bit of sewing up if necessary. He'll also have scans, of course, because the doctors will want to know what's going on inside, as bullets can fragment into little splinters. They don't want to just patch him up if there's still something inside of him. But James will be fine. Being shot has been a walk in the park for him, which is quite unusual. His wife, though, is at risk, and his daughter, well, she's walking a tightrope in the wind while being pelted with bird poop. Minute 18. We now have a crime scene. One thing all police are told about crime scenes is they need to be preserved as much as possible. That means cordoning them off so there's minimal contamination. First responders approach with caution, looking around for any clues in the environment. The first officer logs all the details, such as location, time, and the number of people thought to be involved. They're also very aware of people leaving the scene, getting into cars, stuff like that. Then they scan the actual scene, taking in any information that might be relevant. They also look for possible dangers that might still be present, and not just human danger but things like weapons and even chemical threats. In this case, people are still around, so the cops start interviewing any witnesses. They allow the medical staff to do their job, but in doing that, they still try to keep the scene as uncontaminated as possible. As this was a mass shooting in broad daylight, the case shouldn't be too hard to solve. It also involves a family, tourists no less, so it'll eventually become global news. That means a lot of pressure on the police. One of the gang members is currently being tended to by the second team of paramedics, and cops are also there to try to get what's called a dying declaration. In this case, the dying man looks up at the cops and says, "Screw you, pig." Some of the people nearby are possible suspects and witnesses, so now the cops have them secured and they're all separated. That's important. They have a saying in the police in regard to crime scenes, and that's identify, establish, protect, and secure. They've also established possible routes of escape, and right now police cars are scouring the streets where shooters might be. As for the men that are being put into ambulances, cops have noted where they were found. The same goes for any items at the crime scene. Their location is noted. Minute 20. Detectives arrive on the scene and are briefed by the first responders. They decide who they should call, like forensic folks, legal counsel, and people that might bring special equipment to the scene. IDs are taken from all the people nearby. They also get any photos or videos that have been taken since the start of the incident. Plus, as they're doing these so-called walkthroughs, they're taking pictures themselves. Several detectives do their own walkthroughs, always ensuring no evidence is compromised. If the crime scene is even slightly compromised, it could result in a gang member who took part in the shooting getting off and killing again in the future. Soon they'll remove some of the evidence and ensure it's preserved, packaged, and safely transported, all the time being very careful about cross-contamination. It'll be sent to either an evidence storage facility or a crime laboratory. Minute 25. The doctor treating Jessica has said after his visual evaluation and some abdominal ultrasonography that peritonitis is present, but since bullets to the stomach can cause all kinds of injuries to multiple organs, more checks will need to be done. He can't see that with his eyes, so now she seems stable enough, she's sent to a room where she can have a multi-detector CT scan. There's a very real chance that her peritonitis can lead to the sometimes deadly sepsis, and it most likely would lead to that if she wasn't getting any treatment. It still could anyway. Sepsis is a bodily process where your immune system is actually trying to help you. It's the body's extreme natural response to fighting an infection. The body releases an army of chemicals thinking it's come to save the day, but the chemicals actually damage the seemingly infected tissues, and this can lead to multiple organ failure and death. The bad news is that abdominal sepsis is the worst sepsis, with a mortality rate of a staggering 72%. Even among those released from hospital, only 30% of them survive the year. This is why Jessica is given a massive dose of intravenous antibiotics to prevent sepsis from happening. Minute 45. The scans look good, at least as good as it could after being shot. The bullet hasn't damaged any other of Jessica's organs, but she'll still need surgery to remove the bullet and fix that hole inside of her. It's Holly now who's in a really bad way. Minute 90. The detectives do another walkthrough, what's sometimes called a final survey. All the evidence they have will become a part of a case file, as will forensic and technical reports made by experts in the near future. Sometimes these files will fill many boxes, but other times, these kind of crimes are much easier to solve. Still, guilty men have gotten away with murder because of bad case files or contaminated evidence, and sometimes innocent men go to prison for the same reason. We'll tell you later if the Robinsons get the justice they deserve. Minute 120. If you get shot in the side of the head, the bullet will very likely kill you. And even if it doesn't, the damage to the brain will be vast, and the person might live on a vegetative state or with severe physical and mental disabilities. The best brain injury caused by a bullet, if we can say that, is when only part of one of the two halves of the brain are damaged. It's still not good. You can't really get away with a brain injury of any kind, even just a nick. The bullet has indeed stuck itself inside of Holly's head. So she has what's called a penetrating wound. Her brain has been scanned once again, and the good news is there is no severe blood clotting. There is some swelling, but not so much that she'll not get through the night. Sometimes this kind of swelling can kill you faster than you expect. She's in intensive care right now and will be for some time. Doctors just have to keep a keen eye on her. Day 2. Jessica's already sitting up in bed and talking. The antibiotics are working their magic even though she's still in a bit of pain. Morphine takes care of most of that. At the moment, she doesn't feel well enough to go see her daughter, although James, who's walking about as normal, fills her in on the details. They still don't know how things will turn out. Holly is in an induced coma after just coming back from surgery to have the bullet removed. People are put in induced comas to slow the body down. This lessens the demand for glucose, oxygen, and blood, and allows the swelling to go down. She's a lucky girl. As you know, 95% of headshots that lead to brain injury result in death. But of those that do make it to the emergency room still breathing, there's still a 50% chance they won't make it. The fact Holly is still alive is a miracle. Day 15. Holly looks up from her hospital bed. Mommy and Daddy look really funny. She can't see right. Bits are missing. This is because she has damage to the right hemisphere of the brain. The doctors actually told James and Jessica that what's actually happened is a best-case scenario when you consider brain injuries. Holly's spatial awareness is all off. She has problems remembering things and is often confused. She's also acting weird, like she just can't interpret the emotions of others at all. Sometimes she's completely ignoring what's in her left field of vision, and when asked about that, she doesn't seem to be able to form a proper reply. She still has her sense of humor, but that sense of irony she used to have is all gone. There will be no sarcasm for now. But amazingly, this is the worst of the damage besides some weakness in her left arm and hand. Day 200. The police already have 3 men in custody, but what do you think they've been charged with in the case of the Robinsons? After all, it was an accident. They didn't want to kill any Brits. Well, there are quite a lot of degrees of murder, and sometimes very similar crimes will result in different charges and convictions. In this case, the police are saying there was a transferred intent to murder. With transferred intent, it means the killer was trying to kill someone else, but an innocent person was hurt. The intent to murder someone was still there, though. So in this case, it's attempted murder with transferred murder. Also, because the guys used guns in a street where there were lots of people, in legal terms you can say they acted with extreme indifference to human life. Whatever the case, they will be spending much of the rest of their lives in prison. Day 365. Have you done your homework? Jessica shouts in the direction of Holly's bedroom in their small house in Cleckheaton. Have you become bored of asking me the same questions all the time? Holly responds with a smile on her face. She's not quite back to normal yet. Still having problems with her vision, her attention, and often saying the wrong things in social situations, but the rehabilitation has helped a lot. James and Jessica are happy about that, but not so happy about having to sell the house. Holly's treatment alone cost just over $400,000. That's on top of all the medical expenses they had to pay in the US. All medical treatment in the UK is free. The same doesn't apply to the US, where healthcare costs are the most expensive in the world. Being poor, the Robinsons only bought the cheapest travel insurance in the UK, and naturally, they didn't read the small print. Now, the insurance company is refusing to pay out, invoking a clause in the contract about recklessness and intoxication. The report from the hospital revealed that Jessica and James had alcohol in their blood, which was true. They had a few pints at Finnegan's Way Bar on Ocean Drive earlier that day. Because of a few pints, the insurance company is refusing to pay any of their medical bills. Always read the small print. From now on, say the Robinsons, they'll be staying on this side of the pond, even if the buildings are gray and old and there's no such thing as obesity-causing burgers for 99 cents. Now you need to watch Degrees of Murder. What do they mean? Or have a look at this.